There is a realm that cannot be seen with natural eyes, yet it governs the outcomes we experience every day. Many live their entire lives limited by what they can touch, measure, and calculate, never realizing that there is a higher system already established for their provision. This system is not controlled by economies, governments, or circumstances. It operates on a different set of laws, laws that respond to faith, words, and spiritual alignment. Most believers pray, hope, and wait, but few truly access what has already been made available. It's not because the supply is lacking, but because the understanding is missing. There is an invisible reserve, a divine storehouse, prepared and overflowing, yet often untouched. Today you're going to discover how this unseen system works, why so many never benefit from it, and how you can begin to access what already belongs to you. There is a realm that exists beyond the limits of human sight, a system that functions with precision and certainty, yet remains unnoticed by those who rely only on their physical senses. This unseen realm is not imaginary or symbolic. It is just as real as the natural world, but it operates on higher laws. Just as there are financial institutions in the natural world where money is stored, transferred, and accessed, there is also a spiritual system where provision, supply, and abundance are already established and maintained. It is not subject to economic downturns, inflation, or human control. It does not fluctuate based on circumstances, and it does not run dry when resources seem scarce on the outside. This invisible system holds everything a believer could ever need: peace, healing, direction, provision, and increase. It is a place where supply is not created on demand, but already exists in fullness. The limitation has never been on the side of the supply. The limitation has always been in awareness and understanding. Many attempt to approach life expecting results only from what they can see, touch, or reason out, never realizing that the greater source lies beyond the natural realm. They measure their possibilities based on visible conditions, unaware that there is a higher provision that overrides those conditions completely. This unseen bank operates according to spiritual laws that are consistent and dependable. Just as gravity works whether a person understands it or not, these spiritual laws are always in motion. They are not activated by effort alone, but by alignment with those principles. The unseen realm responds to faith in the same way the natural world responds to physical action. It is structured, ordered, and governed, not random or uncertain. Every provision stored within it is intentional and available, not withheld or delayed without reason. What makes this reality even more profound is that it is not distant or unreachable. It is not reserved for a select few or limited to certain moments. It is ever present, functioning continuously, regardless of whether it is acknowledged. Yet because it cannot be perceived through natural senses, many dismiss it or live as though it does not exist. They remain bound to visible limitations, never stepping into the greater reality that has already been prepared for them. What is placed into this unseen system is not determined by material currency, human effort alone, or outward appearances, but by spiritual actions that carry weight beyond the natural realm. Every act of faith, every step of obedience, and every word spoken in alignment with truth functions as a form of deposit. These are not empty gestures or symbolic routines. They are transactions within a higher order that responds to intention, belief, and consistency. While the natural mind often looks for immediate visible results, this system records and responds in ways that are not always instantly seen, but are always active. Faith becomes the primary means of depositing because it connects the unseen with the seen. It is not merely wishful thinking or blind hope. It is a firm persuasion that what has been promised already exists and is accessible. When a person chooses to believe beyond what circumstances suggest, they are placing something of substance into this spiritual account. Each decision to trust, even when evidence seems contrary, carries value. Over time, these decisions accumulate, forming a reserve that is far greater than what could ever be gathered through natural means alone. Obedience also plays a crucial role because it aligns actions with established spiritual principles. It is not about rigid rule following, but about responding correctly to what is already known to be right. When a person acts in alignment with truth, even when it requires sacrifice or goes against natural reasoning, that action is not lost or overlooked. It is stored, recognized, and contributes to the overall increase within this unseen system. There is a continuity to it. Small acts done consistently carry as much weight as larger, more visible actions, because the system values alignment over appearance. Words, too, are a powerful form of deposit. Spoken words are not neutral. They carry direction and intent. When words are spoken in agreement with faith and truth, they reinforce what is being placed into this unseen reserve. They give form to belief and establish a pattern that aligns with the laws governing this system. On the other hand, words that contradict faith can hinder the accumulation, not because the system is unstable, but because it responds precisely to what is expressed. This is why consistency between belief, action, and speech becomes so important. Many overlook these forms of deposit because they do not resemble traditional methods of accumulation. There are no visible receipts, no immediate confirmations, and often no outward signs that anything is taking place. Yet the absence of visible evidence does not mean the absence of activity. Everything done in faith, every obedient action, and every aligned word contributes to a growing reserve that exists beyond the limits of natural perception. A great number of believers move through life sincerely devoted, yet remain untouched by the fullness of what has been made available to them. It is not a lack of desire that keeps them from accessing this divine provision, nor is it a matter of worthiness. The issue lies in a gap between what is available and what is understood. Many have been taught to hope, to wait, and to endure, but not to actively engage with what has already been established for them. As a result, they live as though provision is something distant, something uncertain, something that may or may not come, instead of recognizing it as something already prepared and ready to be accessed. This lack of awareness creates a pattern where individuals depend solely on natural means, measuring their possibilities by what they can see or calculate. They may pray earnestly, yet still carry an underlying belief that outcomes are controlled entirely by external conditions. They may speak words of faith occasionally, but without a deep understanding of how those words function within spiritual laws, the consistency is missing. Over time, this creates a cycle of inconsistency, moments of belief followed by moments of doubt, actions of faith followed by hesitation. And this instability prevents them from fully engaging with the system that has been set in place. Inactivity is another major factor. Even when there is some level of awareness, many do not act on it with intention. Knowledge without application remains ineffective. A person may hear about spiritual provision, may even agree with it, yet never take the steps necessary to align their thinking, speaking, and acting with that truth. This results in a passive approach where they wait for change to happen rather than participating in the process that brings it about. The unseen system does not respond to passivity. It responds to deliberate alignment and consistent engagement. There is also the influence of tradition and misconception. Some have been conditioned to believe that lack is normal, that struggle is inevitable, and that abundance is reserved for a select few. These beliefs, often accepted without question, act as internal barriers. Even when truth is presented, it conflicts with what has been long established in their thinking, making it difficult to fully embrace. Instead of renewing their understanding, they filter new insight through old assumptions, which limits their ability to step into a different reality. Another challenge is the reliance on visible confirmation. Many are willing to believe only after they see evidence, but this system operates in the opposite direction. It requires belief before visible results appear. When results are delayed or not immediately apparent, discouragement sets in, leading them to abandon the very principles that would have produced change. They interpret the absence of immediate manifestation as failure, not realizing that activity is already taking place beyond their sight. All of these factors, lack of understanding, inconsistent belief, passive behavior, traditional limitations, and dependence on visible proof combine to keep many from accessing what is already theirs. The provision remains constant, the system remains active, but without awareness and intentional participation, it goes largely untouched, leaving individuals to live beneath the level that has already been prepared for them. Within this unseen system, access is not random or automatic. It is directly connected to what a person believes and what they are willing to say consistently. Belief and confession are not separate forces. They work together, forming a channel through which what has already been provided begins to take shape in the natural realm. It is not enough to simply acknowledge that something exists. There must be an inner conviction that it belongs to you and is available now. This kind of belief goes beyond surface agreement. It becomes a settled assurance, a confidence that remains steady even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Confession gives expression to that belief. Words are the means by which faith is released and directed. They are not merely sounds or habits of speech. They carry authority and creative force. When a person speaks in alignment with what they truly believe, those words begin to establish a pattern that corresponds with the unseen provision. It is through consistent confession that the connection between the invisible and the visible is strengthened. Without it, belief can remain internal and inactive, never fully translating into tangible results. The challenge for many is inconsistency. They may believe one moment and speak accordingly, but then allow doubt, fear, or external pressure to alter what they say the next. This breaks the flow and creates contradiction. The system responds to clarity and consistency, not to mixed signals. When words shift back and forth between faith and uncertainty, the outcome becomes unstable, not because the system fails, but because it responds precisely to what is being expressed. Consistent confession, rooted in genuine belief, maintains alignment and keeps the process active. There is also a tendency to speak based on current conditions rather than on established truth. People often describe what they see, feel, or experience, reinforcing the very limitations they are trying to overcome. In doing so, they unknowingly align their words with lack, delay, or defeat. But when confession is based on what has already been made available, rather than on what is currently visible, it begins to override those conditions. It does not deny reality. It introduces a higher reality that has the power to transform what is seen. Belief without confession remains incomplete, and confession without true belief becomes empty repetition. The strength lies in their unity. When a person genuinely believes and consistently speaks in agreement with that belief, they are actively drawing from what has already been stored. It becomes a process of release rather than request, of alignment rather than striving, where what is unseen begins to manifest, because it has been both believed in the heart and declared with the mouth. This unseen system does not operate on guesswork or randomness. It is governed by fixed spiritual laws that function with consistency and precision. These laws are not influenced by emotions, opinions, or changing circumstances. They remain constant, just as natural laws do, and they produce results based on alignment rather than effort alone. Whether a person is aware of them or not, these laws are always in motion, shaping outcomes according to what is believed, spoken, and acted upon. There is an order to how things are received, and that order cannot be bypassed or altered by desire alone. Many approach this realm expecting it to respond to urgency or need, assuming that intensity of desire will produce results. But need does not activate these laws. Alignment does. A person may have a genuine need and still see no change if they are not operating in harmony with the principles that govern this system. On the other hand, someone who understands and applies these laws consistently will see results even when circumstances appear unfavorable. This reveals that the system is not selective or biased. It responds impartially to the principles that are set in place. These laws function through cause and effect, though not always in ways that are immediately visible. Every belief held, every word spoken, and every action taken sets something into motion. The results may not appear instantly, but the process has already begun. There is a continuity to it, where what is done repeatedly establishes a pattern, and that pattern eventually produces a corresponding outcome. Nothing is wasted or ignored. Everything contributes to the overall result, whether it leads toward increase or limitation. Understanding these laws brings clarity and responsibility. It shifts the perspective from waiting for change to recognizing how change is produced. It removes the idea that outcomes are unpredictable and replaces it with the understanding that they are governed by principles that can be learned and applied. This does not make the process mechanical or rigid, but it does make it dependable. When the laws are followed, results follow. When they are ignored or misunderstood, the expected outcomes remain out of reach. There is also a level of patience required because these laws often work beneath the surface before becoming visible. Just as seeds planted in the ground require time before they emerge, the processes within this unseen system develop in stages. Impatience can lead to doubt, and doubt can disrupt alignment, not because the system has stopped working, but because the individual has stepped out of agreement with it. Remaining steady, even when results are not yet visible, is part of operating within these laws, allowing what has been set in motion to come to completion. Among the most significant obstacles within this system are doubt and fear, not because they possess greater power than truth, but because they interfere with alignment. They act as internal resistance, disrupting the flow between what is already provided and what is actually experienced. These forces do not originate from the system itself. They arise within the mind and emotions, often shaped by past experiences, visible circumstances, and repeated patterns of thinking. When allowed to persist, they begin to influence belief, speech, and action, creating a contradiction that prevents full engagement with the principles that govern this unseen realm. Doubt introduces uncertainty where there should be conviction. It questions what has already been established, shifting focus from what is available to what appears lacking. Instead of maintaining a steady assurance, the mind begins to waver, moving back and forth between belief and disbelief. This instability affects more than just thoughts. It alters the words that are spoken and the actions that are taken. A person may begin with confidence, but as doubt takes hold, their expressions change, their expectations lower, and their consistency weakens. The system responds to clarity and firmness, but doubt produces mixed signals, and mixed signals disrupt the process that has been set in motion. Fear operates in a similar way, but often with greater intensity. It projects negative outcomes, magnifies problems, and creates a sense of limitation that feels real and immediate. Fear is rooted in anticipation of loss, failure, or lack, and when it dominates, it shifts attention entirely to what could go wrong. This not only affects emotional stability, but also influences the direction of words and decisions. Instead of speaking and acting in alignment with provision and possibility, a person begins to reinforce limitation through what they say and how they respond. Fear narrows perspective, making it difficult to remain focused on what has already been made available. Both doubt and fear thrive on visible evidence. When circumstances appear unchanged or worsen, they gain strength, reinforcing the belief that nothing is happening. This creates a cycle where external conditions shape internal responses, rather than internal alignment influencing external outcomes. The unseen processes remain active, but the individual steps out of agreement with them, allowing contradiction to take the place of consistency. It is not that the system ceases to function. It is that the connection to it becomes unstable. Overcoming these barriers requires more than momentary effort. It involves a deliberate shift in focus, where belief is anchored in what is established rather than in what is observed. It requires discipline in thought and speech, choosing to maintain alignment even when emotions suggest otherwise. Doubt and fear lose their influence when they are not given expression, when they are not reinforced through words or actions. As consistency is restored, the interference they once caused diminishes, and the flow between what is unseen and what is experienced becomes clear again. Living in true abundance is not a matter of chance, background, or favorable circumstances. It is the result of understanding how this unseen system operates and choosing to engage with it consistently. It requires a shift from a survival-based mindset to one that recognizes provision as already established. Many attempt to reach abundance by increasing effort in the natural realm alone, but without aligning with the principles that govern this higher system, their results remain limited. Abundance, in this sense, is not something chased or struggled for. It is something entered into through awareness and disciplined application. Understanding alone, however, is not sufficient. There must be a continual practice of these principles in everyday life. It is in the consistency of belief, the regularity of aligned speech, and the repetition of correct action that this way of living is developed. It is not built in a single moment of inspiration, but formed over time through deliberate choices. Each decision to remain aligned, even in small matters, contributes to a lifestyle where access to provision becomes natural rather than occasional. The unseen system responds not to occasional bursts of faith, but to steady, ongoing agreement with its laws. This kind of living also requires a reorientation of focus. Instead of being driven by what is lacking or uncertain, attention is directed toward what has already been made available. This changes how situations are interpreted and how responses are formed. Challenges are no longer seen as barriers that define the outcome, but as conditions that can be influenced through alignment with higher principles. This does not ignore reality, but it places reality in its proper position, subject to a greater truth that has already been established. There is also a level of discipline involved that many overlook. It means maintaining consistency, even when there is no immediate evidence of change, continuing to believe and speak in alignment when it would be easier to revert to old patterns. It requires guarding thoughts, choosing words carefully, and acting intentionally. Over time, this discipline shapes perception and strengthens conviction, making alignment less of an effort and more of a natural response. As these principles are applied repeatedly, a pattern begins to form, and that pattern produces results that reflect the system being engaged. What was once inconsistent becomes stable, what was once uncertain becomes predictable, and what was once distant becomes present in everyday experience. The life that emerges from this is not defined by external fluctuations, but by an internal alignment that consistently draws from what has already been established and made available. A crucial aspect that is often overlooked is the timing between what is set in motion and what becomes visible. Many expect immediate results, assuming that once they believe, speak, and act in alignment, everything should change at once. But this unseen system operates with a process that unfolds over time, not because it is slow or uncertain, but because it follows an order that cannot be rushed. There is a development phase where what has been established internally begins to take form before it is expressed outwardly. During this phase, nothing may appear different on the surface, yet significant activity is taking place beneath what can be seen. This period requires a different kind of confidence that is not dependent on visible confirmation. It is easy to remain steady when results are obvious, but the true test comes when there is no external evidence to support what has been believed and spoken. In that space, many begin to question whether anything is happening at all. They interpret the absence of immediate change as failure, not realizing that interruption often comes not from the system ceasing to function, but from stepping out of alignment during this unseen stage. The process itself remains intact, but inconsistency can delay or disrupt what was already progressing. Patience in this context is not passive waiting. It is active consistency. It means continuing to believe without wavering, continuing to speak in alignment without contradiction, and continuing to act with confidence, even when circumstances appear unchanged. This kind of patience maintains the connection between what has been set in motion and what is yet to appear. It prevents the cycle of starting and stopping, which often keeps results from fully developing. When consistency is maintained, the process is allowed to reach completion in its proper time. There is also a refinement that takes place during this period. It is not only about external results, but about internal stability. Belief becomes stronger, conviction becomes deeper, and understanding becomes clearer. What may have started as effort gradually becomes a settled way of thinking and responding. This internal strengthening ensures that when results do appear, they are sustained rather than temporary, because they are supported by a solid foundation of consistent alignment. This aspect of timing challenges the tendency to measure progress solely by what can be seen. It calls for a shift in perspective, where unseen development is recognized as real and valuable. It requires trust in the process itself, not just in the outcome. As this understanding grows, the focus moves away from urgency and toward consistency, allowing what has been established to unfold without interference, following the order and timing that governs this unseen system. Another dimension that carries great weight in this system is the condition of the inner life, particularly the thoughts that are allowed to take root and remain. What a person continually thinks on begins to shape what they believe, and what they believe eventually influences what they speak and how they act. The unseen system responds not only to outward expressions, but also to the internal patterns that support those expressions. If there is a disconnect between what is said externally and what is deeply held internally, that inconsistency weakens alignment and affects the outcome. Thoughts are not passive or insignificant, they are formative. Repeated thoughts become established beliefs, and those beliefs create a framework through which everything is interpreted. If that framework is filled with limitation, doubt, or past failures, it becomes difficult to fully align with the principles that govern this higher system. Even when correct words are spoken, underlying beliefs can contradict them, creating tension between what is being declared and what is actually expected. The system responds to what is truly believed, not just to what is occasionally said. Renewing the mind becomes essential in this process. It involves intentionally replacing old patterns of thinking with ones that align with what has already been established as available. This is not a one-time adjustment, but a continuous process where thoughts are examined and redirected consistently. It requires awareness of what is being entertained mentally and a willingness to challenge ideas that do not support alignment. Over time, as new patterns are formed, belief becomes more stable, and consistency between thought, speech, and action is strengthened. This internal alignment also affects perception. When the mind is renewed, situations are no longer viewed through the lens of limitation, but through the understanding of provision. What once appeared as obstacles begin to lose their dominance, and opportunities become more visible. This shift does not change external conditions immediately, but it changes how those conditions are approached, which in turn influences outcomes. The unseen system works in harmony with this renewed perspective, responding to the clarity and stability that come from consistent internal alignment. Guarding the mind, therefore, is not about avoiding negative thinking out of fear, but about maintaining alignment with what supports access to this system. It is about choosing what to focus on, what to dwell on, and what to accept as true. As thoughts are brought into agreement with established principles, belief becomes more consistent, words become more aligned, and actions become more intentional, creating a unified approach that allows what has already been provided to be experienced more fully. What has been revealed throughout this message is not a distant theory or an abstract idea, but a practical reality that governs access to what has already been made available. There is an unseen system at work, fully established and continuously active, holding provision that far exceeds what natural limitations suggest. The difference between those who experience its results and those who remain unaware is not in the availability of supply, but in the level of understanding and alignment with its principles. Faith, words, obedience, and inner agreement are not separate concepts, but interconnected pathways that determine access. When they are consistent, they create a flow that connects the unseen to the seen. When they are fragmented or influenced by doubt, fear, or inconsistent thinking, that flow becomes restricted. Nothing within this system is uncertain or unreliable. It responds exactly according to the laws that govern it, without exception or favoritism. What many have called delay is often not absence, but misalignment or interruption in the process. What has been set in motion continues to operate even when it is not yet visible. The unseen realm is not inactive simply because it is not immediately evident. It is working according to order, timing, and established principles that require consistency rather than fluctuation. The invitation within this understanding is to move from observation to participation, from awareness to application. Not to approach life as though provision must still be created, but to recognize what has already been established and learn how to draw from it. As this alignment becomes more consistent in thought, speech, and action, what is unseen begins to take shape in the natural, and what was once distant becomes part of lived experience